All right. So I am sitting here with Andrea Reid. She is an attorney that I have known. Andrea, how long have we known each other?
Oh God, probably 15
Yeah,
years, maybe
yeah,
more than that.
yeah. I think you were probably one of the first attorneys that I met, and I've been doing this for 15 years.
Right.
But just some of the things that I know about you and whatnot, because I've known you forever. Is first off, for anyone that does care, you went to law school at FSU.
Go Knowles. Yep.
Yeah, FSU. You went to law school. You graduated in '05. You've been in practicing since 2006, correct?
Correct.
And then just some of, I'm looking here on your website, just some of your crowning achievements. And I'm not going to read all of them because there's a lot of them.
Oh, thanks.
Because you've been very heavily involved. But as it pertains to what we're talking about today in the Alimony Reform 2022 state of Florida is you're a member of the Executive Council of the Legislative Committee on the Florida Bar Family Law Section. You have committed yourself to families. You're a guardian ad litem. You work with domestic violence. Families, divorce, paternity. You've served in numerous leadership positions within the family law section of the Florida Bar. You've lobbied the Florida legislature on the issue of alimony, child support, time sharing, and equitable distribution. And so I want to talk about, how that has worked. And then you remain at the forefront of the family law section of the Florida Bar. You keep apprised, updated on statutes, potential legislative considerations that may affect your clients as well as families in the state of Florida. And I didn't know this. You're a native of Florida?
Oh, born and raised. Absolutely.
Wow, that's a rarity. Most people are transplants.
Yeah, it is. It's a rarity in my generation, but my kids' generation, it's becoming quite normal.
Yeah.
They're really all Florida babies now.
Yeah, I mean, my kids are 24, 26 Florida babies.
Yeah.
But and then you were appointed by administrative order of the Supreme Court to serve on the Mediator Qualification Board, which I'm a mediator, so that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite appointments. That was awesome.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, we may have to talk about that on another episode because that's it. Only because due to COVID, I'm just going to digress here for a second. Due to COVID, they reduced the qualifications for mediation, which I thought was just completely insane. Instead of saying, hey, existing mediators, step up and do mentorship, they reduced the qualifications. And I think they should have raised them, not reduced them, and forced mediators like myself, who I usually do about 12 mentorships a year. I'm like, I'll mentor anybody. But yeah, so that's a whole nother conversation.
Oh, yeah.
About the mediator qualifications. And, you're very involved with the Florida Association of Women Lawyers, which I think is very important because of all this alimony reform. And, the family law section of the Florida Bar, you've co-chaired stuff. So let me just ask you a question on this Florida alimony reform thing. In the beginning, were you a proponent of alimony reform as it was being thought about, talked about? Were you for it in concept or in theory?
So I would tell you that depends on what you consider the beginning, right? So 10 years ago, maybe over 11 years ago, when the first alimony reform movement happened, and the bill and we got the concepts of short-term marriages, moderate-term marriages, long-term marriages, bridge the gap alimony.
Clearly defined.
When that statute was generated, I was all for that. And I really support what was in that statute. And I really still think that it's pretty efficient. Took some time for the courts to catch up with it and took some time for us to get some appellate guidance on it. But nevertheless, that kind of reform was good reform. When you talk about reform going forward, we talk about, the elimination of permanent alimony.
Right.
So am I for that? Yeah, sure. Because at some point, enough is enough. But I think that you have to be able to look at each circumstance very specifically. So Matt, you know this, you never, every family has their own DNA, right? You get behind a family in mediation, or you see a family be represented wherever it is, and every family has a nuance that's what makes them the Smiths, that's what makes them the Joneses, that's what makes them the Reids and the Brickmans, right? And if a court can't consider the totality of those things, then we have a problem in family law, because when you put it all together, you have to let the court decide those things. So when it comes to this modification of permanent alimony, this elimination, look, the word permanent in the statute, it's really a misnomer, isn't it? Because it's modifiable. You know, the PIM case tells us that it's, you know, modifiable upon the correct, you know, the appropriate retirement age. It's been modified in all sorts of cases.
Unless And I've done agreements because as a mediator, I negotiate and for me,
you're gonna bring up the unicorn, right? The unicorn agreement that says,
well, the unicorn agreement, and look, it doesn't matter if it's permanent, doesn't matter if it's durational, doesn't matter if it's it does not matter what type. If in the negotiations, the parties agree to add the word non-modifiable, then it is not by contract, correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
And what a lot of people don't understand is if you're not part of that discussion and that negotiation, they may have done unequal distribution of marital assets and liabilities in order to trade a non-modifiable component. And so you can't just say, oh, well, you know, the Smiths, they just had non-modifiable permanent, they got screwed. Well, they may have negotiated something else. And that's what's difficult when people talk to friends or they're part of groups and they start sharing stories. They don't know the ins and outs that created, because I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, Andrea, right after, it was the day after the Family Law Section Florida Bar Family Law Conference up in Orlando, right? The very next day, and this was back when Rick Scott was doing the alimony reform before he went off to the Senate. We had the alimony reform group meet in Orlando. So I was like, hey, I'm already up here, I might as well go. And what was really interesting about that group was they were all there sharing stories. And it was really odd to me as a mediator sitting there, because they were all complaining about their agreements, not court orders, their agreements. Well, I don't know what was negotiated to create that non-modifiable component, right?
Yeah, what went into the sausage, right? I mean, and that's the point.
That's
and that you as a mediator have that unique experience of seeing sometimes there's a trade, you know, sometimes there's a trade of retirement, sometimes there's a trade of time sharing, sometimes there's a child support tipping, sometimes there's an agreement on a calculation that you wouldn't otherwise use, and that's why you did this one thing. It's all interrelated and interconnected. And if we don't pay attention to the totality of those inner workings, every family has their own DNA.
For more information about my services or to schedule your mediation with me, either in person or using my iChat Mediation virtual platform built by Cisco Communications, visit me online at imediateinc.com. Call me at 561-262-9121, toll free at 877-822-1479, or email me at mbrickman@ichatmediation.com.